Welcome to the Grand Challenges lecture series here at the Institute of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Keele. Just a bit of housekeeping. The loos, any of you that aren't familiar with this building, the loos are just through that door and along and on the left, and the fire exits are down through there, and the muster point is in the Italianate garden, which I always think would be a wonderful place to stand and watch somewhere burned down. So as I always say at a point like this, it's a great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. But it really is a great pleasure for me to introduce our guest speaker today, because Jane and I used to work together about 100 years ago at Liverpool Hope University, and it's been great to see how her career's progressed, and I'm really thrilled that she's coming to talk to us today. So a little bit more about Jane. So Jane is Professor of Media within the School of Cultural Studies and Humanities at Leeds Beckett University, and she's been there since 2016. And before that, she was 12 years at the University of Brighton, and before that, as I've mentioned, she was 10 years at Liverpool Hope University. So Jane's work broadly focuses on two questions. Who can we be, and how can we live in current social and economic contexts? And she considered these questions in a diverse range of contexts, including class, gender, ethical consumption, litter, and more recently, anti-ageing and women's gun ownership. Her most recent books are Lifestyle Media and The Formation of Self, published in 2011, and Fat Bodies, Health and the Media, published in 2016. And as I said, she's currently co-writing a book on women and guns. Her current project, funded by the Independent Social Research Foundation, examines anti-ageing culture, and the findings from this work are the subjects of Jane's talk today. So Jane, thank you for visiting us here at Keele, and I invite you to come and deliver your talk, Politicising Our Wrinkles, Using Optimism to Challenge the Anti-Ageing Culture.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, do you know what? I want you to all work out how old you're going to be in 2050. Just work it out. Right, in 2050, I'm going to be 84 years old. Seems quite old, doesn't it, really? But I'm going to have a lot of company, because in 2050, the number of people worldwide who are aged over 65 is projected to increase to over £1.5 billion. And I and you, we're going to find ourselves surfing what's known as the age wave. And this age wave is demographic changes which are a result of lower birth rates, which at some countries already are barely at replacement levels, a plateauing of population growth in different countries, migration, and the fact that we're living longer. Now, despite that there are many causes and aspects of demographic changes, it is ageing that looms the largest in the ways we think about the future. And their ageing takes a very specific form. It takes the form of a future social and economic threat. So there's lots of talk in the media, for example, of what's called the old age dependency ratio. I mean, that really doesn't sound pleasant, does it? That as we get older, we're going to be part of the old age dependency ratio. And what that means is there's just going to be more old people and less young people to support them. There's going to be less people working to pay the taxes, to pay the healthcare needed by this older group. So already when we're starting to think about the future, we're already starting to think about not just age as being a problem, but we're starting to think that older people are already going to be a burden. So there's lots of talk about the considerable impacts there's going to be on every aspect of society. Labour markets, housing, patterns of consumption, transport, technology, leisure, but most of all, how much this is going to cost, the impact on welfare and health spending. So in short, when we start to think about ageing as a challenge, we're actually thinking about ageing as a problem, and there is considerable anxiety about the social consequences and economic costs of a greying population. Now, we might be thinking 2050 and 2070, they sound like a long time ago, but a long time away, but we're actually seeing that impact now. A key response already to the trouble and challenges of age has been to reconstruct our pensions and working life. And those of us here who work at the university, you are amongst those who've already really felt those changes now. So many of us will be working until, well, I don't know, till we die? 103? I think I'm retired at 103. Now, these reconstructions to our pension and our working life are part of a wider portfolio of policies and initiatives that form part of what's called active ageing. And this is endorsed by the World Health Organization, and it aims to increase and extend our participation and our inclusion in society as we get older by us remaining productive and healthy for as long as possible. So what health active ageing does is it promotes self-responsibility for our ageing. And by being independent and by being healthy, we can reduce the number of frail, dependent older people, and therefore we can reduce the personal and also the social costs of ageing. Yet this active ageing is deeply troubling. Now, it's bonkers to say that taking responsibility for yourself is wrong. Of course, it's insensible to argue against responsibility. Who amongst us does not want a healthy old age? But we need to start asking questions about what is being enacted and what is being promoted through responsibility. And when critics and researchers have looked at active ageing policies, they've found that we get this circulation of an ideal active ageing citizen. In other words, an ideal older person. And when they look, they find that this is the ideal. You might have recognised them. It might be you. And this is the kind of leisure and the future that we're supposed to have. So we're not particularly that old. We're obviously cruising someplace. We've got good teeth. We're pointing at the camera. All right, Bob. We've got friends, clearly. We're really well adjusted. Oh, what fun we're having in our older life. No wedding ring there for her, so clearly this is an affair. So it's all looking good. Now, when critics look at these images, they find that what we get are images that reproduce heteronormative ideals. They also get racialized ideals, so the image of the active ager tends to be white. We get a lot of class privilege and a lot of material advantages. What they note too is when we get these images of active ageing and the way that people are described through policy, is that the ageing body disappears. And as the ageing body disappears from policy, so do any age-related illnesses and disabilities. So what we get in active ageing are a circulation of fantasies and omissions. And what these do is they hide the fact that the biggest impact on our health is not actually our age, but it's society's structure, what they call structural determinants of health. And what also impacts upon our health as we get older are structural inequalities. And they seem to get worse as we get older, as I'm going to talk about later. So these things sort of get missed out. And at the same time, we get another kind of restructuring. Dependency now becomes something that you can manage through being positive and being active, often through exercise. My other research is on the stigma of fat bodies and obesity. And when I look at the ageing and obesity, it's the same discourse. Basically, guys, do more, just keep active, and all of our problems will be solved. We've also got to be mindful of Lynn Siegel's point that just as neoliberal notions of responsibility, just as we're being encouraged to take more responsibility, at that very same time, cuts are happening to our health and social services. So at the very time that we are taking on more responsibility, the very things that we need to enact that responsibility are being cut. So Lynn Siegel and other people talk about active ageing in terms of anti-welfare agendas, saying that they're promoting a neoliberal subjectivity. So somebody who's got numerous benefits, numerous material advantages, so they can go cruising with their secret lover. So when people talk about these really happy ever after stories of age, we really need to think what is being missed out. What's being missed out is frailty, dementia, and hardship. And what's being promoted is this idea that old age is going to be the same as this age, but just in the future. And in other research I've done, when I've asked people to imagine how they're going to be when they're 84, when they're going to be like me in 2050, they imagine their life now, but without work. We can't imagine what it's going to be like when we're older. Now, because I'm a cultural sociologist, I'm not surprised at the fact that we can't imagine the future, because there's no images of that future. The only images we get, Bob and Sally. That's all we get. So, of course, we're going to imagine life now as being the same. So when we start to look at these critiques of these policies, active ageing starts to appear as anti-ageing, because it insists on the management or denial of ageing bodies, of ageing lives, and of ageing relationships. In short, what we get is an endorsement of growing older without ageing. Growing older without ageing. And we swallow this stuff. It makes perfect sense to us. But when I say it like that, you think, hey, what? Growing older without ageing? Is this possible? Well, maybe. But what does this have to do with gender? Because, of course, we all age. Well, age holds very specific and particular troubles for women. Now, we might assume, and we'd be right, that this is because women live longer than men. This has been the case for some time. In 2070, when I'll be 104, life expectancy will increase across Europe to 90.3 years compared to men's paltry 86.1 years. So we're outliving our men. Now, these longer lives mean that we're more prone to what researchers in gerontology, like Margaret Gullett, call social diseases. And social diseases are a consequence of just living too long. Consequences of a lifetime of being exposed to pollution, a lifetime of doing shift work and caring work, a lifetime of coping with our varied living conditions, a lifetime of occupational knocks and life strains, all of which start to make themselves known in our bodies. And some of you just might have a little stretch there and feel that tension. Some of you have been at your desk all day and you can feel a sloping of the shoulder. Maybe you've been in the allotments, you can feel like working in your hip. You know, it happens as we get older, we start to tighten up. So that's one thing we can say about why age is trouble for women. But more significantly, our longer lives are characterised by gendered inequalities which accumulate through the life course. This is frightening. For example, the Centre of Ageing Better in 2017 found that while older people as a group, so men and women, are overrepresented in our statistics about poverty and social isolation, it was older women who were hardest hit. They found that older women are profoundly affected by a lifetime of part-time work, flexible work, poorly rewarded work, no work, glass ceilings, gender pay gaps, and unequal pension provision. And of course, these are complicated and deepened as they intersect with other forms of power relations. So as racism comes in, classism comes in, we start to bring in sexuality as well, then these power relations build up to make things worse for some people over time. So I think we've really got to be, when we start to think about age in the future, I think we need to start building that into the way we understand gender inequalities today. Because the current austerity measures that we have now are going to cast a long shadow. And just in case it's not clear, here's a picture of a long shadow. Yes, I've trained in teacher training. You can see it's coming out in little bits like this. So the long shadow over women's future lives. So right now, women are disproportionately affected by austerity measures. Single mums are making up 85% of those affected by benefit cuts. Those of us who are just heading into retirement have been immediately affected by UK pension reforms. And many of us have not had time to make up the shortfall, even if making up a shortfall was possible. Research to date suggests that these inequalities are going to widen over time and be very harshly realised in our later years. So it seems clear to me that if we're going to understand gender, if we're going to understand gender pay gaps and inequalities in pensions, then we need to start understanding that they start now, not just necessarily when we get older. If we're going to really understand gender inequalities and gender power relations, we need to have a concern for this accumulation, this effect over time. And that's a point I just want to rest here. If we're going to understand gender power, we have got to take into account ageing. And currently, we don't do that in academia. Ageing tends to belong to gerontology, and we tend to do gender research somewhere else. We've got to take ageing out of gerontology and start to realise that it's just as impactful as class, sexuality and race on gender inequalities. That's the political message that I've got for today. This is really important because this long shadow means that equalities aren't just realised now, they persist over time. Inequality haunts. Now, because I'm a professor of media and cultural studies, I'm really fascinated with how this construction of an age wave and our policy responses to it interact with popular culture and consumerism. And I want to go as far to say this interaction is so deep that it's possible to talk of an anti-aging culture. And I think, my friends, we can see this in our bathrooms. You go into your bathroom, you look at your shampoo, and as well as saying that your hair can pull small donkeys because it's so finely, so shiny and so strong, it will also say that your follicles are aging and this shampoo can solve the problem of aging follicles. You just need to look at the creams and the potions, all of which are anti-aging. Then you put on your robe, you go down to the kitchen. All the food is anti-aging superfood. It's everywhere. There's a range of surgeries and injections, there's fitness regimes, there's a whole pile of biomedical, bioengineering, all out there just so you can combat your age. Now, we're not uncritical about this. Every now and again we get a little bit concerned. Last year, Superdrug were really pushing out their Botox treatment, which meant that you could just go into Botox and you could buy your cream, your anti-aging cream, and you could say, do you know what, I'll just have a quick injection while I'm here. And it could all be done. And there was some concern from Public Health England about people who might already be vulnerable because of appearance anxiety. So Superdrug said, you know, we're going to do tests on people. We're going to have a bit of a questionnaire around it to make sure we protect vulnerable people, which is great. But while we focus on the vulnerable consumer, there's very little to question why Botox, which is an anti-wrinkle treatment, should be needed at all and why it is in such demand. There is very little in our culture that allows us to question questions like this in Cosmo. Botox. How young is too young to start? This isn't a critical question. They're not going, how young? They're going, how young? When can we start? Bring on the Botox. Now, the question of this, when is too young to start, we're already seeing it in our language, because actually when you start to look at your anti-aging stuff, it used to use the word wrinkle. Sorry, there should have been a trigger warning. I'm going to use the word wrinkle. It used to say wrinkle. Now, it doesn't say wrinkles anymore. Now it says fine lines. This is like the pre-wrinkle, right? You're going to be watching these fine lines, because if you don't watch them carefully, they turn into... and more recently, the fine line also has had a makeover. Now we start to talk about the start of... This is the pre-fine line. Where we're going to go from this, I really don't know. So apart from the odd murmur and tweak, little bit of anxiety, anti-aging products are successful because they hold together a whole pile of things. They fold together youth and health. So much so that health and youth become interchangeable. Added to that, we get this idea that if you look after your health and your age, then you are a very responsible person. You're a responsible citizen. And we get quite a lot of that, because the more of this anti-aging stuff that goes on, the more we get the idea that age is something we can do something about, and then it becomes moralised. Age is something you should be doing something about. And what does this leave us with? What it leaves us with is a valorisation of appearance. And appearance starts to become a diagnostic tool, i.e. you can tell how healthy somebody is by looking at them. Forget going to university to do your medical degree. You just need to look at somebody to know how healthy they are. So looking young means looking healthy, but also how you look then becomes a reflection of how moral and responsible you are inside. All of this is wrapped round again with this increasing stigma about looking one's age. You never say that when you see somebody. You don't go, oh, hi, you really look your age. We never say that. We never want to be our age. We never want to look one's age. It's still rude to ask a lady her age. Oh, by the way, I'm Jane, I'm 52. I know, I look my age. And also, we've got this stigma and a fear about what wrinkles in our appearance may represent. Now, all of this is gendered. All of this really hits women a lot harder, even though the cosmetic pharmaceutical industries are really gearing up now to focus on our men. And you're going to see many more adverts aimed at men, around about their 40s and 50s, about them looking tired in the workplace. So just have a little lift here, lift there. More cosmetic surgery, so men have a more athletic physique. So little implants in the calves. An interesting story. I know a friend who got an implant in his car, and it detached and it roamed around his body. Yeah. So that's just a warning for everybody out there. So all of this is specifically gendered because it relates to, we've always been very ambivalent about women's ageing. We don't really know what to do with our women culturally, because women's worth is related to their reproduction and sexiness. When women start to become post-reproductive, we really think, well, what do you do? What is the point of view? Women that have got a lifelong experience of bodily objectification, we know this, that women from a very early age are taught to understand their body through the gaze of somebody outside. Men, for the moment, and please hold on to it, guys, they don't have that notion of judgment, that constant judgment. So we are brought up in what's called appearance surveillance. And, there's mirrors in this room, and some of us will be looking just to check, am I looking okay? Does this wrinkle show? Is the light good for me in this room? All of us are doing this to hide our necks. So women are confronted, therefore, with a body requiring constant work. And all of this means that there's labours, performances, practices, anxiety that belong to women just being in the world, that become culturally expected and normalised. And I think anti-ageing is just the latest fad of all of this. Now, should you think you are exaggerating this because you're old, I think you only need to look at reality TV. Reality TV is my favourite, actually. Reality TV is quite fascinating. It's newish, and it does different things. It's cheap TV. And what we find in reality TV is a lot of makeover shows. And when you look at makeover shows, you can see it's all really about age. What's interesting about age when it comes onto the makeover show is it becomes magical. So in one way, age is something which is inevitable, okay? So as you go through time, age scars itself onto your face and your body. Nothing you can do about it, or is there? Because in the magic world of reality TV, age can become repairable and reversible. So age, or rather its appearance, starts to signal the appearance of a woman who's abject. So if you look, have I got a little thing here? Oh, you see, you're not that good, kid. You're brilliant at everything else. So this here is before and after. And in the before of any makeover show, you often see somebody who's so lost. They're so drab. They're so sexless. Their life is a misery. They can't even make eye contact. Their body just slumps. Often, in this show, they're allowed to have clothes, but in other shows, they're put in the most drabbest underwear. Where do they get the underwear for these makeover shows? So it's often, and the camera really focuses on, it's very unflattering, So we get somebody who has let herself go. That is interesting, isn't it? Let yourself go. That's how important appearance is to our sense of self. When your appearance starts to go, the self goes too. What are we going to do with her? It's all right. We've got a team of experts. We've got a chemical peel. We've got a facelift. We've got a very glamorous wardrobe makeover. And we've got a £9 million haircut. And what we get then, my word, we can see redemption. Redemption is a really important word to think about when we watch makeover shows. Because now we get somebody who is back. She's back to being normal. How she's going to go shopping in the Asda in this dress, I do not know. But this is the kind of normative femininity we should all be aspiring to. And the words which are used are hot. Right? She's hot. She's sexy, she's looking good. But importantly, I think she's now started to consume properly. Before, she didn't buy anything. They'll say, when did you last get your hair cut? And she said, I got £7 down the barber. And everyone goes, darling, you need at least to spend £40 on a haircut. What do you dress? Asda? No, man, no, you need to go. So, this, we know, don't we? Women, how is expensive? This look, it's not cheap. Is it? It's not cheap. Okay. Now, what I've argued in my book on makeover culture is makeover shows serve a pedagogical function. That means they're instructing us. And I think what we learn through makeover shows is that there are perils and threats associated with uncontrolled aging, such as diminished self-esteem and social invisibility. And these fears and threats promote in all of us this need to manage our age. So we're taught to look for our ages. We're taught to look for our age in the crease of our eye, in the sagging of our jaw, but also in the quality and quantity of our sex lives. So why does this matter? Well, I think anti-aging culture is harmful, and I'm thinking of it as a term of poison. And I think this poison has a number of harms. These include bodily anxiety and objectification, which doesn't just belong to younger women, as we might expect, but is projected right up the life course. You're not free of this, as we once were. There is a devaluing and disgust of older women's bodies. There's an increased stigmatisation of ageing. And we might want to ask now, how are younger people, how are younger women expected to respond to older women in this context? It also denies the diversity and flux of our body's capabilities as we age. We might also think about the psychic harms here when we're all encouraged to deny and avoid a future self that we must inevitably become. That's got to come at some price. But what concerns me most is that anti-aging is denying us the capacity to learn to be old. It breaks down the intergenerational dialogue. We're not talking to each other, so we're not learning from each other. And this has got massive consequences for intergenerational relationships, for relations which are based on dependency and vulnerability. Peggy Cruikshank, excellent writer, she argues that as soon as we start hiding vulnerability and dependency and caring, not only do we struggle to care for other people, but we also struggle to be cared for. So, if anti-aging is a poison, it's time for the antidote. And this is where I'm being optimistic. Now, I'm a sociologist, right? Sociologies are not optimistic. Sociology is the most miserable of the social sciences, mainly because we focus on social injustice and social inequality. You know, I'm at my happiest, really, when life is bad, because I've got lots to say about it. You know, if we come out of Brexit well and society is good, I'm probably out of a job. You know, misery is my tool and trade. And yet, as Catherine Runswick-Cole said last year, it's really important that we are attendant to power relations and social inequality and injustice, but we can't leave things at the terrible. That's the word she said. We can't leave things at the terrible, and I agree. But I think there's something also terribly naive and apolitical about being optimistic. And this is where Mary Holmes comes in useful. She outlines something called critical optimism. And what she says is when you're going out to do research in the world, instead of focusing on the problems, focus on the possibilities. Focus on the relationships that are forged in communities, particularly of marginalised groups. How are they helping each other? How are they resorting each other? And also, don't just assume that when life is really bad, that people can't do something about it. So she gave me a framework to take forward to go and do some interviews. I'm just conscious, am I okay for time? Okay, so I'd like now to talk about the Independent Social Research Foundation. I thoroughly recommend you have a look, isrf.org. Because they do a number of fellowships for early career and mid-career scholars, and they're an independent funding body. Really have a look. For those who are in academia, have a look at their work. Anyway, they gave me a year off so I could go and do some research. And what I wanted to focus on was, how can I learn from women? What kind of women can I learn from? And Catherine Woodward had said that if you want to know different stories of ageing that we get from the media, we need to speak to women who, quote, pointedly perform ageing differently. So people who really are anti-aging. Another work has suggested that feminist women may be more critical about anti-aging and be aging differently. So I think, do they hold the antidote? So I got this money to do some research, and I put a call out on social media, and I was very deliberately provocative. So I said to women, do you think anti-aging is a poison? Do you want to be part of the antidote? come and tell us what is good about your ageing. So the words poison, antidote and good. You know, I wasn't opening, this wasn't going to be representative. I wanted people who were already miffed like me, and I wanted to hear what they had to say. So, if any of you do interviews, you should know you should only really do 12 interviews. I did 60 interviews. And 60 interviews is a ridiculous amount. But this says a lot about people's need to come and speak to me. It says a lot about people's anger, but it also a real need to speak well of their own lives. They felt they'd been written off as they got older. So they wanted just to say, you know, there's more to it. So what can I say about the women's lives? Well, despite the wrinkle, the W word and the fine line words, women weren't bothered about that. What was important to them is how they felt as they got older and what they were able to do. They felt that anti-aging was both a lie, because it didn't work, and exploitative, because it created and preyed on anxieties. Instead, each of them, to a woman, said that aging was something to be embraced. Now, the youngest woman in this sample was in her 40s, and the eldest one was 101. So it was quite a range. So let's talk about what's great about being old. And there is lots to celebrate about being old. So this is Kate, she's 63. She says getting old is the best kept secret. You can feel you can pretty much get on and do anything. It's the most amazing confidence. And so many women, particularly in their 50s and 60s, spoke about this confidence, particularly those women who were in paid labour. Mandy, age 59, had really senior pharmaceutical company. And she felt that this confidence and also the capability that she'd got, this competency over time that she meant that she could do her job well. She didn't have to do her job brilliantly, as she had to do in the past, but she could do her job well enough. As she got older, she stopped putting her emotions into it. She said, it's part of my life now, it's not all of my life. She felt that this readjustment had come from years of experience, and it made her a better boss, because instead of being competitive, she was actually nurturing the careers of people around her. For other women, 50s, and this just came from a university lecturer, she said, and I'm sure we've all felt this in all of our life, where you have this imposter syndrome that dogs you for years, you know, that you are never, ever good enough. Let's not talk about it now. I'm standing in front of you. It's not good. Let's forget about imposter syndrome for now. But one woman in her 50s said, I've got to the stage now where I think nobody else is thinking that I'm an imposter. It's just me thinking I'm an imposter. So actually, I'm not an imposter anymore. Nancy at 65 said, there's a point in your life where that voice in your head that tells you you are not good enough just switches off. You wake up one day and it is gone. Now, confidence was expressed in a whole range of ways. Not all women had financial security, but that prompted some kind of risk-taking. So Pat, she was 54 years old. She met me for an interview, and she had her suitcases round her because she was off to travel the world after our interview. And she was a nurse, and she said, my pension is, I've got a crap pension. So what's the point of me working, getting this crap pension, and then being too ill to be able to do anything with it? So what she was doing was she'd stopped work, she was going around the world, she was retiring now at 54, and then she was going to come back in a few years and pick up some work to make that up. And that's what she was going to do, retire now. It's something like a gap year, if you like. So I think that's a fantastic idea. For an 88-year-old, this burst of confidence resulted in taking up abstract art. And I've shared this story with Sue before. For one woman, she always wanted a tattoo, and her mum had told her that, imagine when you're 80, how awful that tattoo would be. 80 years old, tattoo. And she just felt absolutely, she wore it very, very proudly. For another woman, she started to learn how to fly a helicopter. Some of these, yeah, I know. She was very good at flying it, she just couldn't take off and land. So it's quite interesting. All of these are collected together. Some of these stories are collected together in a film that I made of the women's experiences. So I'll pass that round so we can circulate. It's a very short film. Other benefits included paying off the mortgage. Oh, please God. A tolerance towards other people, being calmer, but also not putting up with fools. So a little contradiction coming through there. Having time for friends, having time to waste. Oh, my word, I can't even imagine it. Time to enjoy lovers. There's a lot of sex when people get older. I just thought I'd say that now. At least if you're not so concerned about your wrinkles, there's more time for sex. So there's something to look forward to. More time for art, for music. more time for volunteering, more time for activism. Joys were watching your own children grow up. Somebody said to me, it's true, they do become your friends if you're lucky. Seeing your grandchildren grow. For other people, it was about developing new passions. Betty, 100 years old, she was housebound. She was an expert in 1950s films and film stars. And she said, I've never really had the time. For the last, until I was 80, there was no time to do that. Now my real treat is my afternoon film. So age also brought a time to get to know oneself. Benny called it being happy in one's skin. And this was a little bit sad, really. For some women, when they turned to 40 and 50, they started to appreciate who they were. For one of my ladies, she was much older, and she said, it's only been very recently that I've really tried to really love myself. So it was a lifetime of really self-hatred before you reach that point. And I think if anything comes out of this research, it's going to be sort of saying, we need to just spend more time loving ourselves and being comfortable in our bodies and stop thinking about our appearance. So this is Benny. I think you just sort of get more comfortable in your own skin, don't you? I think when you're younger, you worry about what other people think. And there's a saying, in your 20s, you worry about what everyone thinks of you. In your 30s, you don't care anymore. And in your 40s, you realise they weren't interested in you in the first place. So being self-content and confident meant also being confident about the body. Do you know what? Not one of these women cared about what their bodies looked like. They cared about their strength. They cared about their agility. They cared about the pleasures that their bodies brought them. They cared about the wonderful food that they could eat. They just cared about life. There's so much to do when we put that mirror, we cover that mirror up. So this is one woman, 58. I'm fitter now than I've ever been, because that's a really important aspect. It's made me feel, she does yoga, it made me feel more stronger within myself. And I'm hoping it's going to keep going into my 60s and on. Now, this increased confidence in the self and in many cases in the body. One woman said, 82 years old, Tony, she said to me, she's very serious, I've got a really surprising speed in my walking frame. Yeah, I really like that. Now, this increased confidence and also this freedom, for some women it was a freedom that had come with later in life with their body, meant that women could tackle incidences of social invisibility. Now, for any of you who've let yourself go grey, as I have, you'll notice that invisibility comes quite quickly as soon as you age. And women of all ages, particularly really past 50s and their 60s, they talk about being looked through. If you're younger than this, or if you're a man, you might be thinking, how is this possible you can be invisible, right? But you literally are looked through. People don't see you. People walk into you because they don't see you. If you stand at a bar with grey hair, well, forget a drink. Just forget about it, You've really got to lean across the bar and help yourself, or make some kind of fit before you get any kind of attention. So social invisibility is actually very, very important. It's a crucial aspect of our life as we get older. Women speak about going into shops and not being able to get any service, or if anybody is speaking to them, they actually speak to their daughter or speak to the people with them. They don't make eye contact. So what did these women do? You're going to love this. They put on weight. Yes. They put on weight so they had more physical substance, one woman told me, to take up space in public. One woman said, I stand in the middle of the pavement so people have to go round me. They insist on being recognised in shops. They call out when people push in front of them. No, I'm not having that. I was here first. It takes confidence to do that. I was here first. I put bright glasses on here because one woman bought a range of brightly coloured over-large glasses, and she forced people to make contact with her. She said, I approach people with a cheery hello, an overly cheery hello. It frightens the life out of them. I look frightfully deranged, but they bloody see me and they have to respond. Now, for elderly women, for very elderly women, like people in their 90s and 100s, this is more difficult. But they actually kept visible through social media. The iPad was very, very important, and a passion for politics. But people who were housebound really past 80, they did struggle. They struggled. They said it's difficult when you stop being Mary and start being dear. Because when you become dear, you are no longer talked to, but you're talked at. And even though these women were doing their best to engage their carers in meaningful conversation, so many people said to me that mine was the only decent conversation they'd had in a number of years. But nonetheless, they tried their best. They read the newspapers, they watched the news, they had passion for what was going on in their life. So what's clear is that none of these women cared a damn about their... Not one. What they cared about was the world. They cared about the environment, they cared about politics, they cared about family and local community. But they felt generally silenced and ignored. They were fighting, but they still persisted. Even if they were housebound, they still persisted with any opportunities that were open to them. The more elderly the women were, the more critical they were of anti-aging products. The secret of good... Come closer. The secret of good age, of getting old, is not how you look. It's about being interested. It's about being connected. It's about being informed. Mary, aged 83, said, "Frankly, my dear, if you live long enough, you're going to look like a prune." So, what resources ageing? Now, I'm really interested in what makes these women do things differently. And when I sent out a call for women to be part of the antidote, I sort of asked for feminist-identified women because I wondered if feminism would give a sort of critical approach to it. And all of the women did sort of self-identify as feminism. And for all of the women, what feminism had given them in an early part of their life was a stance against the beauty myth, that they were really standing up against heteronormative forms of beauty. So they were already very careful about, these endorsements for us to shave our bodies or to trim our bodies and diet and all that. So they were already taking a critical stance. But actually, feminism was not always deemed relevant to how women aged now. And this has had a lot to do with how feminism was defined and understood. Most women understood feminism as being something to do with gender equality in the home or about division in the workplace or about division of labour at home. And this meant that feminism was relevant when they were younger. And that was so how is feminism helping you age differently? They would just go, I don't really think, I'm feminist, but I don't really think it's got anything to do with my ageing. It was different for women who were much more active feminists in the younger. So 20 women in the sample have been part of the women's liberation activities and marches. They've been in radical actions around abortion, campaigns about nuclear arms, sex work and domestic violence. For these women, feminism did offer something. It offered them a political framework to understand how age and ageing are gendered sites of inequalities. They could see that they were being treated badly. They could see that this wasn't an individual situation, but a structural one that was caused by policy, and they were angry. And yet, for some women in this sample, now in their 70s and 80s, feminism was not a present activism, but it rather formed a tight friendship group. So women who had once been marching met other women who once marched, and they joined together. Most of this research was in Brighton, where these tight groups existed. So what we had at little friendship groups, where there were shared values of social justice, this helped them form their friendships and networks that allowed them to age well and also look out for each other. So in some cases then, there is a nostalgic relationship to feminism rather than an active consciousness. But it's these past feminists who were the most critical of ageing itself. Where's the research? For those of us working in universities, this goes to us. Where is the research on feminism and ageing? Where is the literature? The focus, one woman said, is on younger women. Those post-feminists. And it's all gone with them. We're still here. Hello. Stuff is happening at this end of life. I'm not sure what feminism is for me now. Across these active women, there was a very strongly expressed critical concern about the ability of feminism to speak to collective values of social justice, not just for their age group, but for all women. The individualisation and consumer-friendly post-feminism had left older women feeling a bit left behind, but also let down. So what did resource anti-ageing? I'm going to speed up now because I think I'm running out of time. Women's resources came from role models. Every woman, to a woman, could identify a brave or outspoken, slightly batty older aunt, teacher, mother, or leader. This means that we've got to be role models for the women coming up behind us. This really stresses the importance of intergenerational dialogue, of interaction and exchange between us as women to enable those role models. For other women, it was being a lesbian, and their experiences of those battles to assert a sense of worth in a homophobic society. Their battle scars and their experience translated into their ability to be much more strident in old age. So Roxa, age 73, I refuse to cross the road to avoid a group of young people or young men. I walk right up to them, right into the faces. You're not a threat to me. I'm not intimidated. It's my space too, and I've done this all my life. She was right. So, I'm getting to the end now. So, I've really tried to think about optimism to ask different questions. I've used Mary Holmes' idea of thinking about possibilities, what's possible in really bad circumstances, to try and find out how women who age differently live their lives. I wanted to find out what was good about life. And from this, I wanted to learn something about ageing. I wanted to learn something about ageing that I'm not going to get from active ageing policies, and I wanted to learn something about ageing that I'm not getting from Makeover TV. What happened in my research is I opened up a brief opportunity for people to express great anger, but also to express great joy at the gifts that age had given them. Their insights into ageing were not characterised by decay, loss and misery, nor were they characterised by being on a cruise with Bill. Okay? What Lynn Siegel calls the relentless buoyancy of neoliberal oldies. Rather, they spoke of their life as being textured and unfolding. So this research suggests that if we're going to age differently, we need role models and we need a better type of feminism. Feminism, I still think, can be a key resource. Feminism, as Vicky Bell argues, is a different way of seeing and a different way of hoping. I think that feminism gave women once a very important orientation to their lives and to the cosmetic industry, but it's letting them down now. Feminism now is uneven and it's patchy. But I hold out hope, and I think in this room we can be the role models and we can write that accessible, important, relevant feminism for the future. So you've got to go now because we've got work to do. Thank you.